Who is Gideon Hesman? Where'd you grow up? How'd you grow up? What's your family like? Let's start there.
They set you up for the potential of great success and the opportunity to really push yourself to be more than you are, but it also puts you in a position where you might overload your plate.
Which was a big change going from your house to, a full-on like gym retail space out in the public.
What an experience for me, right? Like no financial skills at all. Obviously like no business education or anything like that, but CrossFit can just take all of my energy and bottle it into 45 minutes where I, can barely limp out the door.
All right, welcome back to Cracking the Success Vault. Today we're here with Gideon Hesman, owner of Hesman Athletics and Performance Gym. I don't know what street you guys are on. It's over
top
outlet
road.
malls, right?
Yeah, top of the road.
Out on the outlet malls. So we've known each other for about 2 years. The way we got introduced is I came to like an open house to the gym. We got talking about my swim career and your football career and stuff like that. So it's been a lot of fun getting to know you over the last couple of years. But I also don't know your entire story.
Yeah.
So, from growing up to football to being a business owner, and I know you're a firefighter as well. So we're going to talk about a lot of things today.
Yep.
But let's start at the beginning. So who is Gideon Hesman? Where'd you grow up? How'd you grow up? What's your family like? Let's start there.
Yeah. So Gideon Hesman, grew up in LaSalle, big family. Big religious family. My parents were both like pretty heavily involved in sport as youth, and then kind of wanted to pass that down to us. And so there's 5 kids in my family. And the running joke was that my parents just got better at making athletes the farther down they went. So I'm number 2 in the list. But yeah, we all played a ton of sports. So basketball, I played football, ran track, did a little bit of soccer, and just all of the things that come with that being a family of 5, like just how much it was to try and get everybody to their practices and get everybody the extra training and managing budgets and all that kind of stuff. So I kind of think like for me, the pivotal kind of moments for me athletically were, getting recognized in track and field and getting recognized in football from an early age, like kind of in grade 10, started seeing, interest from different universities and different teams being like, hey, like you have a lot of potential. Let's see you kind of get to your potential. And kind of the big thing blocking that was just injuries. I just was plagued with injuries throughout my entire youth athletic career, broke dozens of bones, had a lot of concussions. So kind of, it slows down your ability to really execute on where you think you could have gone. But despite that, kind of raised with like that immigrant mentality, work ethic from my mom being, fresh off the boat from Portugal, and like what she had from her parents and kind of passed down like a measured version of that, wanted to be the hardest worker in the room. And so I think that's kind of what ultimately still landed me, my football scholarship at Mac and the opportunity to play at that next level, despite, over like the eligible games I could have played in football. I think I was eligible for maybe 70 games between my high school career and playing for Team Ontario for a couple summers. I only played in about 25 football games in my entire career, which is like a pretty crazy stat. And just, so many injuries. And so, usually you have all those games to accrue extra film and extra reps to improve, because you can develop in practice, but you really execute on those development and trying new things and testing yourself against the best people when you're playing, the other teams. And so, missing on some of those opportunities, definitely would have played a factor. But yeah, ultimately kind of still tried to be the hardest worker in the room. Was able to get up to Mac, and then ultimately that career got sidelined by dislocating my hip, and that was kind of like that was it, right? So,
so did the injuries come like fluke accidents? Were they training injuries? Were they things that you were like, I'm going to work really hard, be the hardest worker in the room, and then go and hurt yourself? Like what kind of things were they?
So I think there's a couple big factors that come into play. So researchers basically concluded that if a child breaks a bone prepubescently, their odds of breaking a bone is like 400% that of their peers after that. Because basically it's calcium organization, right? You break a bone, your body's going to scab all the calcium, kind of pull it out of all the other bone structures, push it to repair the break, but then now all the rest of the bones are a little bit more brittle.
Right.
And so then it just increases the incidence of that. And so like I did like tib fib when I was in grade 7. And so like that's like a pretty young age to have a major break like that. And then after that, it was just kind of one thing after the next. Right. Pretty major break of my wrist in my 5th year. And it was something like, whether somebody else would have broken their wrist doing what I did, but, came through the line. Guy comes to tackle me, and I'm like, oh, like, I'm not going to try and truck him because maybe he'll grab an ankle. So I just stiff armed him so hard, and it looks amazing on film because I blow his helmet off. Helmet pops off, his ear pads pop out of his helmet. It looked like he got like shot by a sniper. But I like shattered my wrist. So I broke my wrist in 5 places. And so that wrote off my whole 5th year season where, it would have been a great year to like get lots of film. And even that game, like I scored a couple touchdowns, I had an interception, a couple big sacks, like despite playing the rest of the game with a broken wrist.
Right.
And I think that's kind of like the character that I brought was like a rough grit to the game, but it wasn't like a refined quality. And that's a great juxtaposition between like the way I played and the way Micah played, my middle brother. Okay. Whereas like I was always going through people, maybe not the smartest way, but I, just through everyone. Whereas Micah was like very Barry Sanders-esque, like go, negative yards for 15 yards to then squeeze through a positive break or whatever. Right. And so, he was, definitely had a lot less injuries kind of to get him to, what was a more successful university career.
Right.
But yeah, I think all of that, a little bit of just lack of access to like good training tools and like learning how to do mobility properly, maybe could have had a little bit better nutrition when the education wasn't there. When, when we were, in high school, there definitely wasn't as much concretely known about how youth athletes should be managing their diet and managing their sleep and stuff like that. Okay. And so, so all of that kind of contributed to those injuries. The final one being, doing the hip at Mac in my first year there. And yeah, like I think it was a huge bummer because I think I'd spent the last 4 years with coaches and scouts and stuff being like, you could play in the NFL. Like you could be one of those guys to get there. And then not getting there because of injury was just tough. Like I always, in my head, I was like, I just got to make it to the show so I can get their level of medical intervention and like keep going. Like, idolize like a Gronk where like he's just like a bionic man just held together by tape and well wishes. A couple braces. Like, if I can just get there and they can just keep me on the field, I have the grit to keep playing. And couldn't make it, right? Not everybody does, and I think there's tons of great athletes that could make it to that level. That injury is the factor.
Absolutely.
But I think that put into a bottle is like why I'm doing what I'm doing now, right? Like you mentioned like I have a full-time firefighting job, and so for me, doing the gym is a lot extra on my plate when I'm already pretty busy and I got a young family. Yeah. But it speaks to like, I think, everybody talks about how like in your adulthood, the stuff that you do on top of what's necessary is like work you're doing to heal your inner child. And you're trying to be that guy that you wish you had had when you were a kid. Right. And I think that's where I'm at now. Like when I was a kid, if I had a mentor to be able to come alongside of me, be like, hey, here's a better way to train. Here's a better way to eat. Here's how you can get motivated to reinforce these behaviors. This is how you can carry this, this young intensity and this undeveloped skill and hone it in a way that's going to be long lasting. Right. That would have been amazing for me. And I'm trying to be that for the next generation. Right. Which is great.
And so let's go back. So you, a lot of injuries, wanted to make the NFL, didn't because of that. How did you transition from that career path, athletics, to firefighting?
Yeah.
And for myself, I know I talk a lot about, I had this like 18-month depression when I stopped competing swimming, right? I didn't make the Olympics. I kept spinning my wheels. It wasn't more of an injury. I think it was more the nutrition side of things and just how better to recover so that I could keep progressing. And so I had to, come out of that 18-month sort of depression to be like, okay, like life still goes on. And what am I going to do? So how did you make that transition from athletics to firefighting? And was there sort of a hard period in between those two things?
Yeah, I think that like the amount of intensity that was applied to like the goal of maybe making to the NFL and making to the CFL was so much that I took that intensity and then I threw it into a bunch of other areas of my life. And so, one of those is like my wife and I got engaged really, really young and got married because I was like, well, this is something I can throw myself into intensely that has a good value proposition. And that's how Gideon and Trina got married at 21.
Right. Wow. Okay.
And other than that, I found CrossFit, which was at the time an amazing way to just take all this intensity and throw it into 45 minutes. Because again, I was still in school. So being a student, you only have so much time. And I was like, well, football was 35 hours a week and, between practices and workouts and everything else. But CrossFit can just take all of my energy and bottle it into 45 minutes where I can barely limp out the door.
Right.
And that had a lot of like good initial success for me, like being a pretty powerful strength athlete and going into CrossFit where, being able to move heavy barbells, being able to move your body easily was like a big part of the sport. So that really soaked a lot of my intensity. So pretty much, maybe I took let's say 9 months off, like trying to rehab the hip and getting it back to a point where I could move again and run again. Kind of dove full headfirst into CrossFit really quickly, kind of caught the attention of like a local CrossFit gym owner. And he kind of the same verbiage down my throat of being like, you could be an amazing CrossFit athlete. You have all the right pieces. You just got to kind of hone it in. Same was Adam Morden. So shout out to him wherever he's at these days. But he actually paid for my CrossFit level 1 of like an intention of goodwill. He's like, I know you're broke. I know you're coming off of this, and maybe I wasn't clinically depressed, but definitely he could just tell. He's like, this sucked for you. He's like, I want to give you kind of the next step. He's like, go do your CrossFit level 1, become a CrossFit coach. I'll hire you here as soon as you're ready. Wow. And it was amazing. But by the time that I'd actually gotten a chance to take the course, pass the course, get back to the gym, he'd actually sold the gym.
Oh, wow.
And so he sold it to a couple brothers, and they were, two great young guys, and they were like, well, we don't need a coach. We're just going to coach everything ourselves. Right. And so kind of went on the quest to try and find, okay, well, where can I take this intensity and this love and this new qualification and find a way to like manifest it in the best way. Yeah. And so luckily there was a new CrossFit gym that opened very close proximity called CrossFit Odeon. And he's like, well, I don't know you. I don't have any value in you other than the fact that you do have your CrossFit level 1. So here's what I'll give you. If you do a 200-hour volunteer internship here at my gym and volunteer coach for 200 hours, then I'll let you kind of be part of the community and eventually give you a paid role and stuff like that, which was tough, but beggars can't be choosers, right? The other gym didn't need me at all. There was no long-term value there. And as much as maybe that was a pretty tough pill to swallow to try and volunteer 2 hours, I learned so much during that time. Because I was volunteering, it gave him the financial bandwidth to kind of supervise me as I coached a lot. And so he gave me a lot of feedback, and he was like pretty ruthless. Like we didn't have like a relationship. So for him, he was just like, I'm just some, young kid that he's like, hey, well, either I'm going to make this kid do what I want him to do or not. But it helped really refine like my coaching style, more from the sense of like, as an elite athlete, like they give it to you really straight, right? They're just like, hey, here's the objectives. You got to do it or not do it, right? Whereas in, commercial health and fitness, the people aren't necessarily fully intrinsically motivated, and they need the extrinsic motivation to like help pull them through work. And that was something I never needed. You know what I mean? Like a coach was like, you have to do X amount in the gym. You got to do your wind sprints. You got to do your mobility. And you're like, yeah, that's what I got to do. So I just do it. Yeah. Versus an athlete in a CrossFit gym. You're like, hey, well, today we're doing this. We got burpees. And they're like, oh, I don't really want to do burpees. And it's like, okay, well, how do I have to like be a coach and make sure they're doing it properly? They're doing the right volume. They're doing the appropriate weight. But I also have to like motivate them and keep them entertained. And that was like my first foray into like learning that being in the health and fitness industry wasn't about just being the best coach and being, technically solid. You also had to be a good salesperson. You had to sell them on the style. You had to sell them on the why behind the workout, even if they couldn't understand it, because they don't have that, physiology literacy, right? Because they didn't study biomechanics. They didn't study chemistry like I did, to understand cellularly, metabolically, why they're doing those things. Right. And so that was really cool. And so I did that internship for the 200 hours. And then ultimately at the end of that, he didn't really have a job for me, which was kind of the biggest bummer.
And so you're what, 20?
So it would have been like 22.
22, 23?
Yeah, it would have been that kind of just that following year. Okay. And then, he was kind of like, well, I can't really give you enough hours, so you might as well start looking somewhere else. And I was like, okay, here we go. Deal. So at the same time, I was still working at the university. That year, I actually had 7 T4s for all the different jobs that I had at the university. So was a lifeguard at the pool. My wife and I worked for Avtech, which was like a staging and rigging production company. So like whenever concerts were at McMaster, like we helped set up the stages and the sound and everything else, which was super cool. Very unique job. Got that one because I had like my high angle rescue certs from rock climbing instructing at the university, which was another job that I had. And yeah, so it was like a lot of fun. But through the high angle rescue stuff, I met a bunch of firefighters in Hamilton, and they were like, why are you studying biochemistry when you would be way more suited for this? And I think for me, like the reason I was studying biochem is like, I grew up in, again, a very religious household. You're doing the sports stuff, and like all of my coaches who were great mentors for me, like just that helping motif was like layered on in my life, like so much that like, I was like, well, I have to find a way to give back. And everybody's like, well, you're really smart, so you should study biochemistry, become a doctor.
Right.
And so
It's amazing how many athletes do that. I mean, when I went to university, my first thing was going to be biochem. I wanted to do the doctor, wanted to help the athletes, wanted to do whatever, and my class schedule and my swim schedule just didn't add up, and I got pushed into business, which, luckily today was one of the best things that ever happened. But it's amazing when you have those coaches and mentors in your life that believe in you more than you do, and how that can really direct you down a path.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's it can be such a volatile ledge though as well, because I think they set you up for the potential of great success and the opportunity to really push yourself to be more than you are, but it also puts you in a position where you might overload your plate. And I think that's also something that you've learned about me is and I think this is why we've hit it off so well, is people who come from that elite athletic background, once they transition out of athletics, where it's like this, it's an infinite pool of investment, right? As an elite athlete, you can always be doing more.
Yeah.
And so I think when you come out of elite athletics and then you try to take it to the real world, not everything can soak an infinite investment at one time. Obviously any business or any initiative you can continue to develop, but it's not maybe not all at once. Sometimes you have to get a piece of it done and then let it marinate for a bit, let it mature, see how it develops. And I think that becomes tough to be this ex-elite athlete trying to live a normal life where you're no, I want to do more. I want to keep pushing into it. Yeah. And I think that makes you, again, dive into all these different initiatives.
Right.
But anyway, so for me, transitioning from the idea of wanting to be a doctor to help people to, well, I'm also a very physical person and I could be an emergency responder and I can still help people, but use other aspects of myself that, are uniquely positioned to be really effective at. And so when I looked into starting to apply for firefighting, looking at my resume being, okay, I've had a lot of different jobs, but not a lot of hands-on skill. So at the same time, I basically put 2 ads up on Kijiji. At the time, I put one up for myself as a CrossFit coach, being well, I'm a CrossFit coach. I have 200 hours of coaching experience, but nowhere to coach. So if anybody's looking for a CrossFit coach in the GTA, hit me up and I'll come find you.
Right.
And then I put up another job posting where I'm just hey, I'm a big dude. I'm very physically capable, but I don't know anything about hands-on skills. I don't, I've basically never swung a hammer, never used a drill. But if you're a contractor out there that just needs a meat mountain to push a wheelbarrow or carries, construction supplies for you, I'm your guy. And in the same week, I got responses back for both of them, went to 2 different Starbucks, had 2 different interviews, and it was amazing. So one of them was just a contracting company owned by a guy, Jamie Cormier, and he was in his late 50s, and he had, probably 40 contracts with condominium corps where he was just their main repair guy. And so he would come and he'd fix a bathroom, he'd fix their roof, he'd fix their fascia, he'd do whatever. And he took a big risk on me. And it was to this day, I wouldn't be where I am without the opportunity to get that experience. Because again, I had no hands-on working experience in my resume at all before starting with him. And that was kind of the missing piece that obviously firefighting, they love to get their nurses and they love to get people with these different healthcare skills, but I didn't have that hard healthcare skill, maybe a soft one with the lifeguarding. And then I was missing kind of the hands-on technical side of things.
Right.
And so Jamie taking that risk on me and hiring me was amazing. And the irony of it is that it fit perfectly with this CrossFit gym that approached me. And so it was a couple that were going through a kind of a nasty divorce, and they owned this CrossFit gym together, and they didn't want to sell it, but they wanted to keep it. So they basically hired me to run their gym full time, where she would kind of coach one class in the morning, he would coach one class in the evening, just so the members kind of saw them. But then otherwise they were
it's all yours.
Here's 5 classes a day. You need to do all the programming, do membership retention stuff, maybe plan some events, do whatever, which is crazy to give a 22-year-old.
Because I didn't know that about you. Because when we met, you had moved your gym from your house, your garage, whatever you want to call it, barn, whatever, into what, a 15,000 square foot space?
No, 6,000.
6,000 square foot space.
Yeah.
At the outlet malls, which was a big change going from your house to a full on gym retail space out in the public. And I didn't know that you had run the CrossFit gym.
Yeah, and that was what an experience for me, right? No financial skills at all. Obviously, no business education or anything like that. And they had their structures in place, so it's not I had to come in and reinvent their membership model or stuff like that. But it was still cool to get a really neat look behind the hood. And I never got to revisit that until I kind of dove in on my own, right? Because after basically I only worked in those 2 roles for 9 months before I actually ended up getting onto Windsor Fire, which was extremely lucky on my part to get on as fast as I did. But both of those were like a key exposure opportunity for me to both work with a small businessman in the contracting and kind of see how he operated and how he, managed his time and managed his resources, managed me as a resource to make money and provide value for his clients on a very small, personal, one-on-one scale, and then to kind of get behind the hood of the operations of a gym and see, okay, well, like here's how much their rent is, and here's how much they're making, and here's how they manage their margins, and kind of get an idea of that.
Right.
And it's like the first time that, like, as an employee, when I saw something behind the thing, be like, hey, they're making a lot of money compared to what I'm making when I'm the one here all the time.
Right.
And so again, did that for about 9 months, and then got hired in the fire department, and then that was this whole whirlwind because I didn't go to firefighting school. Starting firefighting was a massive wake-up call. Like as much as in my head, I'm like, oh, I know what it's going to be. It's going to be physical. It's going to be working in the elements. It's going to be long nights. It's going to be whatever. I definitely wasn't prepared for like the blue collar atmosphere of it. Because I think that is also where a lot of guys come before firefighting is they come from a construction background or they come from a trades background into firefighting. And it reinforces this very, they call it paramilitary, but I think it's like this an interesting paramilitary industrial culture where like, you're getting like the deep notes of like seniority rules. And like, if you're the new guy, you have to kind of do
A, B, C, D.
You gotta earn your way into respect. You gotta earn your way into some of the more fun, interesting roles and stuff like that. And that wasn't something I was kind of prepared for because basically I'd either had like the jobs on campus, which were like very collaborative, very like, very fun, really. Is the reality.
That's got to be an interesting challenge. I mean, I didn't have that kind of challenge for a while, but being a high level athlete, needing somebody to tell you when to go to the gym and how to eat better and whatever, I was the same way. Swimming, nobody ever needed to tell me to go to practice. Nobody ever needed to tell me to work hard. Coming out of that into the business world, it's really difficult to be an employee. It's very difficult to take orders from somebody when you can see behind the hood, when you know how much the company is making. I mean, I didn't have, like small business experience. Mine was like, I had while I was still swimming, I had a couple stints at like Canadian Tire. I worked for a couple caterings on the weekends through a swim friend whose dad ran a catering company. But you're seeing all these things and you're like, I want to do something myself. I want to be in control. I don't want someone to force me to come to work. I want to go to work. Which is interesting because you had the same feeling, right? Like you see behind the hood of a gym and you're like, man, like I'm the one who's always here. I'm the one managing everything. And even though you're not taking the risk, you sit there going, I could do this. I could run a gym by myself.
Yeah. And I think that like only got made worse when I started firefighting and was still coaching on the side. Because when I came back to Windsor, I coached CrossFit at a couple different gyms. And it's like, I always joke that I became the worst employee because I kind of knew what was going on behind the scenes. So I had an idea of like incomes and like what was, how much were they charging? How much was I making? The value proposition. I was making good money firefighting. And so I was making a lot less coaching. And so I'm kind of like juxtaposed between like, okay, well, I'm making good money on my day job. So I don't really need to come and like hustle for the part-time, but I was doing it because I enjoyed it and I still wanted to be part of that athletic development scene and culture.
Right.
And then, so like I did that for probably the first not the first couple of years of firefighting, because again, I was just too overwhelmed with just like how hard transition to firefighting was. And honestly, that was where I kind of got hit with my like first wave of like being depressed, because it just, when you're firefighting, you're doing exactly what you're told. There's zero agency to do anything of your own volition. There's no creativity. It's just, you're a tool. You're really complex, really
have to do it a specific way.
Exactly. Yeah.
Save a person a specific way, do a specific set of things.
And I think that's kind of like what, like it almost just like killed me in the sense of like I had no expression. I had no ability to like to be ingenuitive and creative and find efficiencies. And so that was like a hard couple of years to kind of come to the reality of like missing sport as that outlet and missing, again, when I was working at the CrossFit gym, like being able to like plan the workouts and try different events to try and generate more interest and stuff like that. And so, definitely tried a couple times to get a little bit more into the behind the scenes of the gyms that I was working at and figure out if there was a way that I could express a little bit more of my independence and bring a little bit more of my own flavor and try some things to like make more opportunity, make more money,
Right.
and make, you know, ultimately like a better service.
Right.
But when you're not in the ownership stake, like it just like the value proposition isn't there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like you're doing so much of the extra work, and you know you're not getting that respective, you know, payout of
Right.
the pie. And so ultimately, when you know COVID happened and kind of the gyms all had to kind of close,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I feel bad for you know anybody who owned a gym during that time, because I can't imagine how stressful that would have been.
Yeah.
But ultimately, they were in a position where they were trying to ask a lot of coaches, but weren't able to really provide them as much because their incomes had been slashed so much.
Yeah.
And that's when I was like, yeah, I got to walk. At that point, like
Mhm.
the fire department was crazy busy. Like we had a few waves where there was at one time almost 40% of the fire department had COVID, or either had COVID or like
We're in
or like
lockdown.
we're in lockdown or whatever the
yeah,
case
measures
was.
14
And
days,
so
whatever. Yeah.
overtime was insane because they're just like,
Right.
well, we got to call people, and it's like you ended up working kind of
Yeah.
every other day, which was
Yeah.
insane. And so I was like, yeah, like I'm just gonna make more money here. I'm gonna dive in, do this, and that almost was good for me. And like that was like part of the thing that gave me enough money to be like, you know what, I should just open my own thing.
Right.
Like I made all this money out with OT. I'm not coaching anymore, but I still want to be coaching, but I don't want to go back here where I'm going to be like the air quotations is taken advantage of. And I wouldn't say that I was, but at the time it felt that way.
Right.
You know what I mean? Cause I didn't know,
Yeah.
how much went into behind the scenes, keeping it open. And that's when I opened the barn. Right. And
Right.
like the barn was exciting. It was cool. It was a manifestation of everything that I wanted to have as a coach. It was a training grounds that had all the tools that I wanted. It was private, so I could train people exactly the way that I wanted to.
Right.
And you know, if it was just about me and like my like satisfying that inner itch of like being able to coach in a way that I wanted to,
Yeah.
staying there would have been great. But what it really was missing was like the community aspect of it. And I think
Yeah.
that's like everything's got to come back to like your community, right? Because it's all well and fun to like make good money and be doing cool
Yeah.
things, but if you can't share that with the people that you love, then it's like
Absolutely.
it doesn't ring in the same way.
Right.
And so that's actually where I'd been seeing Andrew Sinnott for chiropractic for a long time, and him and I were just always talking about what it was like to be in small business, and like you know, I referred a lot of my clients to him when they had different issues come up, and like,
Yeah.
hey, like you got to go see my guy, like he's amazing. And but then you see them for the next session, say, hey, did you go see Andrew? Like, oh, well, no, I forgot to call, or like whatever the case was. And then Andrew like, well, let's bring it all under one roof.
Right.
Let's just open a new space. It's hard for the gym to, you know, from the ground up, be able to afford rent on a big place. But it's like if we get some clinicians in there, we bring a few other trainers in there, we can really
Right.
make something work, right? Which was like fun and scary and everything else to kind of try something like that post-COVID.
Right.
And so we ended up basically collecting 10 individuals that were, in theory, interested
Okay.
in like doing this thing. And so it was like myself, Andrew was a chiropractor, a few other trainers, a few other healthcare practitioners, and we took the foundation that I had from the barn, which was like about $100,000 of like quality Rogue equipment, and then added about another $300,000 of their investment to smush all that together, come into this totally naked space. And like
Yeah.
the space we got at the outlet mall was like more than naked. I think you've seen pictures, but
Yeah.
just like they didn't even like
It was
finish
basically
the
4
walls from there.
walls.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it wasn't even 4 walls because
Yeah.
they didn't even finish them towards the unit. Like we had to like insulate them, do all of our drywall work. You know, all the electrical had issues. Like we basically built them a new building from inside out.
Right.
But again, created this space that was really cool and very
Yeah.
unique, right? Like, you know, CrossFit gyms are really cool. They're a great place for culture, but because they're so one-minded in like the style of training, if you're kind of coming in and want to do something a little bit different, you're kind of in the way, is the reality. And I
Right.
think we wanted to create the space that allowed anyone to come in and train the way that they wanted to. And I think especially in like in the early days when like we still had that seed capital and like there was money to like staff things and try things, like doing the wellness fair that you that you came out to, it was really fun. You know what I mean? Like we had, like you come to the gym and at any given point, there'd be like a couple volleyball players training. There'd be, you know, a couple people in their 70s who are, you know, rehabbing knee injuries.
Yeah.
You know, we had like a kid who was trying to become a Paralympian who just recently gotten like a leg prosthetic, and he's in there, you know, doing plyometrics and stuff. And it was like,
Wow.
the energy was cool and it kind of manifested everything that I wanted. But again, just, you know, wake up call with like business ops and like just learning so much. But I think that in order to, you know, to get it off the ground, we needed all that seed capital. We needed all these people to have like their piece of the pie. But I think at the time, this is like like, you know, maybe profound, maybe not profound. But I kind of got into this group of individuals thinking, you know, I know, like I'm 50th percentile for business acumen. Like I definitely don't know all there is to know about running a small business, and I probably know more than the average cat, but I'm about 50th percentile. And all these other people who've come to me saying, I want to, you know, every one of those 10 people was like, I want to own a gym. I've dreamed about owning a gym forever. And so like, cool, we must all be around 50th percentile for understanding what it's going to take to run a small business. And I think that like after the first 6 months, it became very clear that my unique experiences behind the, you know, under the hood of different other small businesses, and the way that I kind of look at things, that I'm maybe not 50th percentile, maybe I'm a little bit more above higher.
That. You didn't give yourself as much credit.
Didn't give myself enough credit, and inversely kind of gave others a little bit too much credit, where they said, oh, I really want to do this, but not really digging deep into the, like, okay, well, how much have you like figured out what the price model needs to look like, and how are we going to generate new memberships, and how are we going to do this? And so I think that was kind of like the tough pill to swallow of just, we got 6 months in and we weren't cash flowing. And I know you shouldn't cash flow a business right off the hop, but we weren't truly a new business. You know what I mean? I'd been running stuff out of the barn for a couple of years, and I'd been very cash flow positive in the barn. Like we, you know, for a very small space with no overhead, you know, was making $5,000 a month, which was great. You know? And then all the healthcare practitioners, a lot of them were already established practices, right? When we moved everything together, it just didn't have that catalytic effect that we wanted. And I think looking back, probably the biggest thing was like failure to have a concise identity. And I think that made it hard for the community to look in and look in the window and say, what's going on in there? That's cool, but I have no fucking idea what's going on.
Because there's just too many different people doing different things in different ways. I mean, not having an identity is definitely tough. Right, it's tough for brand, it's tough for recognition, it's tough for all that kind of stuff. So let's kind of come back a little bit. So between growing up, between your experiences in your early 20s and firefighting, what do you think you would say would be 2 or 3 positive, let's call them lessons, positive things, traits, qualities, whatever, that you learned growing up that made getting into business for yourself something you wanted to do, or that you knew you could be successful at?
So I'll say the first one, we're going to go all the way back to the most formative. My family did paper routes from the time that I was like 10. And like back in the day, there wasn't online sales. You had to go door to door and collect money for the papers that you were delivering. And the onus was on you. You had to collect all the money, and then I had to give money back to the Windsor Star and be like, okay, well, here's your cut of this, right? And like, so from the age that I was like 10, you know, my parents would come with us, but like, they were like, you go to the door and you say, hey, here's your receipt, but like, you need to pay me the $7 that you owe me for your paper for this month. And like that opportunity to do face-to-face, like, it's not sales work, but like collecting money and like having to like have that conversation with an adult gave me so much confidence. And like, you're dealing with people saying, no, I don't have money, or no, I don't want to pay you. Like, no, I never wanted the paper. And like, you having to like negotiate this as a 10-year-old and build that up. And like,
that's gotta be tough.
It was weird, right? Like, cause like no other kid that age is doing that. And like, but like my parents are both teachers, and like my mom specifically has like a lot of education in early childhood education. Like she took psychology as well as education. And she knew that like getting this exposure to these like tough conversations was going to be such a good developmental step for us as kids. And I think just because I was the oldest boy in the family, I bared a little bit of a like larger brunt of doing that. But to this day, I think that was a massive service that my parents did for me, that like when I'm working with some of my coworkers or employees at the gym, that they have such a hard time with in-person sales, and they have such a hard time talking to people and asking for money. And there's so many nuances that go into that, and we could talk for 2 hours about what what helps make in-person sales feel better. And obviously it's reps down range, and obviously it's confidence in what you're selling, and confidence that the thing that you're selling is something they actually want and need, right? But I think that's like step one. That was massive. And then I think, other than that, I think just being like having communication with people in a variety of settings, and where you have to kind of convey that value prospect. And I think being a trainer is a great way to have to do that, kind of like we talked about before. It just teaches you the nuance of how to have a conversation with somebody to help them understand your point of view and why something is valuable for them. And I think a lot of people struggle with that maybe it's empathy or whatever the phraseology might be of like just getting into the other person's shoes, seeing it from their perspective and explaining it in a way that makes sense for them. Because I think we're all really good at regurgitating why it makes sense to us.
Yeah.
But just because it makes sense to us doesn't mean that that's the way that it's going to make sense to them.
Right.
And so I'd say between kind of just, like those early exposures to doing a little bit, like doing a lot of the coaching, I think it translates really well to small business.
Right.
So, and I think it's fascinating where, now in the industry, like over the last 2.5 years, we've had about 25 coaches through the space, and a lot of them have left on good standing. Some of them have left for, other reasons. But it's been really curious to see where it makes sense to like shift my hiring practices. And I want to say, like, Tony Smith said this in his podcast, actually, where he owns Garage Gym. And he's been very successful in the industry locally. But one of the things that came out...
He was a police officer before.
He was a police officer, which it just follows like a similar motif of like type of person that wants to help people but finds a new lens for it, right? But he said that now they prioritize hiring from people with customer service backgrounds because the skill set of communication, of salesmanship, of ensuring that the
people are taken care of.
Client are taken care of.
Right.
Is almost harder to teach than teaching somebody how to be a good coach.
Yeah.
And so that's been a huge factor for me in hiring kind of my most recent hires. And I've had a lot of success now adding that as a criterion of like, do you have sales experience?
Yeah.
Do you have customer facing service experience? And that's been huge in hiring.
And so what would you say, let's change the same question, but the opposite. What would you say would be some hard lessons? Give me 2 or 3 hard lessons you learned along the way that other entrepreneurial type business owners, people wanting to get into business for themselves, could take away from your story and say, man, that's something I shouldn't be doing. At least this early on or whatever.
Alex Hormozy.
Yeah.
The key to success in whatever you're doing is in the work that you've been avoiding. And that one's been punching me in the face of just like, I love the front end part of my business. I love dealing with people. I love helping people understand the value proposition of higher level training, of training in a space that gives you room to do the thing that you need to do. I hate the back end. I'm so non-diligent of like running the book super tightly or like going back and analyzing the efficacy of different decisions that we made in terms of buying the equipment or even how much we rented the space for and stuff like that. I'm like, let's just fail forward. We're going to keep outworking this. We're going to keep outworking this.
Right.
But not really doing those details of the things that I didn't want to do is where I'm definitely suffering consequences. Yeah. And I think the other piece is just trusting your gut in the niche that you're coming from. And there are decisions that I didn't make based on the partnership that I developed where people were like, oh, like, no, that's not a good idea. We shouldn't do that right now. The biggest one for me is that when we launched the gym, I really wanted to dive into getting a separate marketing team to run all of our marketing. The reason being, every single person in our 10-person conglomerate was either a healthcare provider or a fitness coach or something like that.
Yeah.
No one had any business experience. No one had any sales experience. No one had any social media experience. And I was like, we just spent $400,000 to get this business open. Is it not worth spending 5% of that to show it to everybody?
Right.
And, we kind of voted on it because that was the structure that we created when we started this thing. And everyone said no. Right. And I think that to this day, we've been open 2 years in our commercial location, and I still bump into people like, I've never heard of you. Yeah. Who are you guys? Yeah. And I'm like, that is probably our biggest failure. Yeah. Honestly, is just lack of effective exposure. And now, we're out of seed capital, and now we're kind of bootstrapping it and trying to, keep pushing it along. And so now I have to be a lot more creative with finding ways to create exposure. And that's where, our most recent event doing that High Rock simulation comes from is like, we didn't make money on the event, but it generated 80,000 views of social media exposure. Right. And
High Rocks is becoming the new sort of CrossFit. Yeah. Is my understanding. After all of CrossFit's stuff that went on. High Rocks is kind of becoming the new thing that people are after.
Yeah, I think that it's like a really intelligent take on how to create a community around a fitness initiative. Yeah. And I think there's a lot of things that are different about it than CrossFit. And I think the biggest one is that if CrossFit is like super high intensity and very random, High Rocks it's definitely hard, but it's not as much of an all-out intensity as much as it is like a battle against your mental capacity to keep pushing through.
Right.
And it's super predictable. It's the exact same race course every time that you do it.
Right.
And so it's something that it gives people a grounding of consistency in a time of the world that things are so volatile and all over the place.
Right.
And I think it's such a great marketing piece. And I think for us, the reason why we've dove into it over the last year and a half is we like how much predictability it gives to our clientele. For like, hey, we're training for this event. Right. You know exactly what you're going to expect. Here's a great way to train for it. It's all very measurable. And so it's very much in line with the values of our training space.
The interesting thing that I've seen with CrossFit in High Rocks with the ads I've seen, the other events I've seen, some of the social media I've seen from other events, the one you guys went to in Toronto, I think it was last year, is if you relate it to CrossFit, I mean, every time I watch CrossFit games, whatever, it's like these big giant jack guys, and you're like, that's 0.1% of the population. Sure. And when you watch High Rocks, you're like, it's just everyday average people. You don't have to be able to lift 300 pounds, 400 pounds to be able to compete. Anybody can compete, which is a really unique thing that I think a lot of fitness competitions don't provide anymore.
Even just case in point, our population's aging. There's no doubt about it, right? Yeah. CrossFit is tough because there's a high amount of skill acquisition, which is like, don't teach an old dog new tricks. And so it's tough if you're in your 60s and you've never touched a barbell before. Like, okay, now throw this thing above your head, right? But, you know, it's also tough to do like challenging things and whatnot. Our last High Rocks that we hosted at Alumni Stadium, we had 265 athletes. 30 of them were over the age of 60, which is amazing. Very cool. Like, what a cool way to be able to to prove this thing is accessible to everybody. Right. And it's very scalable. All the pieces of a High Rocks are very low impact. And so it's not hard to sell it at all because it is a very accessible challenge to work towards. Right. And I think that's like the last thing that they've done is just made it is like exactly like you said, doesn't require you to be in the top 1% of muscle mass and be this huge guy that has 20 hours a week to work on all of these skills that have no transferability to the rest of your life. Right. It's let's focus down on just the core fundamental movements, things that every person should be able to do. Right. If you look at all the High Rocks things, it's like, do you want to be able to, pick up 30-pound sandbag and be able to put it on your shoulder? Do I want to be able to pick up my 30-pound grandkid and put them on my shoulder? Right. Yes. So it's a transferable skill. Absolutely. Do I want to be able to push a wheelbarrow in my backyard if I got to move some dirt around and do some landscaping? Yeah. These things are just so transferable to life. And I think CrossFit thinks that it is transferable. But I think it just has a higher, in some ways, but the barrier to entry is just so high. And so, I think that's where we're excited to be, fully diving into High Rocks. And I think it is the manifestation of like all the things that I've been trying to work on and build this community that's fitness-based, fitness-oriented. It has the challenge to kind of create the spark of motivation, but it's all very accessible and just great for injury resilience. It's like I even have some of my athletes doing High Rock style stuff because it's so easy to add it into their program to build extra volume that allows them to become more robust, more energy resilient. And so interesting. It's been fun to find that.
So we only have a couple minutes left. I want to do sort of a little bit of sort of a let's call it a rapid question thing. So I'm going to ask you a couple of questions geared towards the gym itself. Sure. And I want you to sort of tell me, answer the question as best you can, as in as few words as you can, but getting the point across. Sure. Okay. So if they were going to go and work out at Hesman, why do you think people should come and check out the gym?
So we're a very intimate setting. We're way smaller than like a Movati or a Good Life. So if you're going to come, you're going to know kind of the people that you're working out with, which is great. Our class sizes are a lot smaller than the average class-based fitness. And so you're going to get a little more personalized attention within those classes. And we have a huge emphasis on flexibility. We're going to meet you where you're at and modify the workout to where you need it to be on that given day. So you're just going to get a really cozy experience that way.
Okay. And in terms of what you want people to think about Hesman Athletics after they've come to the gym, come to a class, how do you want people leaving feeling when it comes to the services you guys are trying to provide?
Yeah, I think we just want people to take away that they were very well taken care of in a very like personal and personalized experience. They got exactly what they came to look for. I think.
Okay.
You know, again, if you go to like a big thing for like F45, all F45s all across North America, it's the same workout because the programming is done by corporate. And so you're showing up, the weight's already set out, you're doing whatever it is they want you to do. That's what's on the docket for today. There's no ifs, ands, or buts.
Right.
Versus, again, we want to meet you exactly where you're at. You have a specific goal that you're working towards. We'll find a way to modify the workouts so that you're not just doing what's on the board for the day, but you're doing it in a way that meets your goals and progresses you towards your goals.
Okay. You talked a little bit about the sort of the confidence you learned at a young age for paper outs and stuff, the grit that your family taught you through sports and all that kind of stuff. We always end the podcast asking our guests what they think success is to them. So for Gideon Hesman, you know, firefighter, gym owner, you know, former athlete, if I asked you what does success mean to Gideon Hesman, what's your answer?
I think the ultimate form of success is that you are surrounded by people that truly appreciate the impact that you've had on their lives when it doesn't come at a cost to your family. I think that is ultimate success, where if you have the ability to help other people, but you also have the ability to maintain a stability in your personal life, that your loved ones know they can also rely on you, and it's not at the expense of one another, that's success, I think.
Interesting. That's a neat answer. Okay. Where can people find you? Where can everybody find the gym?
Yeah, throw us on Google, Hesman Athletics and Performance, gyms at Windsor Crossing Outlet Mall. We're all over social media, so you can find us on there. Drop in for a class. First class is free. Get in there.
First class is free. Good
First
offer.
class is free.
Well, thanks, man. Gideon, I appreciate you coming out, chatting on the podcast. That's another episode of Cracking the Success Vault here. You guys can find us on YouTube, on social media. You can check out Instagram. We're kind of everywhere, and we're looking forward to sort of the next guest coming up. So,
Sweet.
Gideon, thanks for the time today.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. I appreciate it.